New firmware, overclocking, new cables, fans, case mods. It's fair to say that a lot has happened since the original KS0 Kaspa miner first came out. And back then when I made my first video on it, I also got one from that same batch of miners as you guys did who ordered one after watching that video. And it's now been about 160 days since we all received our miners from that batch. So I figured I'd make an update video to cover everything new about the original KS0, as well as give you guys the details of how much I've mined on mine so far. So let's get right into it because we got a lot to cover here. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Coin Mining Central is an online store for ASIC miners, and there's no doubt that right now, ASIC mining is by far looking like the most profitable type of mining, and the miners that I'm personally most interested in right now would probably be the Bitmain L7 and E9 Pro, as well as the Jasminer X16Q. And what's cool about Coin Mining Central is that they always offer free worldwide express shipping, and I've always felt fully comfortable recommending them to you guys, and here's why. As opposed to most other ASIC vendors that are based overseas, Coin Mining Central is based and run out of England, Europe, where they have to adhere to the very strict regulations for customer support and personal detail protection that we have over here. And of course, all brand new miners come with a full manufacturer warranty as well. And because of this, Coin Mining Central has been a highly trusted ASIC miner store for miners like you and me for over 5 years at this point. They also care about this community, being very active and reachable on social media, and they've also provided loads of exclusive discount codes for you guys that you can use together with the link in the video description to save big on any miner that you want to get. And speaking of prices, I don't know if you've noticed, but ASIC prices have been dropping dramatically these past few months, so right now could be a very good time to stock up on some cheap hardware before the crypto market recovers, especially considering you get the already competitive pricing that Coin Mining Central has, plus the free worldwide shipping, plus the exclusive discount codes that I mentioned. So go check that out today. I'll have all of those discount codes and the exclusive link for you down in the video description. Alright, so let's start by talking about if you should buy an IceRiver KS0 now. And the answer is just a flat out no. If you're shopping for an entry-level Kaspa ASIC now, you should just get the KS0 Pro. And the main reason for that is that the original KS0 basically isn't even available to buy anymore and has more or less been fully replaced by the KS0 Pro. And so if you're wondering whether or not you should get one of those, what I'll do is I'll leave a link down in the video description to my video where I do a deep dive on the long-term profitability of all of the Kaspa miners, including the KS0 Pro. And down there in the description, I'll also put a direct link to the KS0 Pro in case you don't want to watch that video and you just want to go get it right away, as well as a discount code for getting it from Coin Mining Central. But now, does the fact that there is a replacement mean that the original KS0 is just completely outdated at this point? Nope, not even close. As a matter of fact, in many ways the KS0 is even better than it's ever been. And with that in mind, let's talk about the official firmware update released by IceRiver themselves. And in case some of you are unfamiliar, firmware basically is just the actual code that runs on your miner to make it do what it does. And sometime during September, IceRiver released a new firmware version for all of their miners, with some upgrades and improvements. And it is totally not required to update your firmware. Your KS0 should be working absolutely fine without the update. And also when upgrading firmware like this, there is always a slight risk of something going wrong and your miner basically turning into a figurative brick. But that said, this firmware update does come with some nice new features. Most importantly, much more even hash rate. So, if you've looked at the hash rate of one of your KS0s either on the miner web interface or on your pool dashboard, you've probably noticed that the hash rate fluctuates up and down like crazy. But with this firmware upgrade, the hash rate should be a lot more even and stick fairly close to the advertised 100 gigahash consistently. And that is by far the biggest improvement in this updated firmware, but there are also some other smaller things like better fan speed adjustments, which yes, the KS0 does actually have fans in it, although that particular feature upgrade might not be, that interesting for us KS0 owners. It's more relevant maybe for if you have one of the bigger IceRiver Kaspa miners. But lastly, with this new firmware version, the miners should now just work right out of the box with most pools as well. Although I think most pools have added support for these things now anyway, so that is probably a bit redundant at this point. So, should you upgrade to this latest firmware? I don't know, maybe? It's kind of your call really if you think it's worth it. But what I'll do is, down in the video description, I'll put a link to a video by 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, a fellow YouTuber, where he goes through the full process of updating your IceRiver miners with the latest firmware. And while you're over there, why don't you subscribe to his channel too? He puts out a lot of great stuff. Again, link down in the video description. Now, the thing that you are probably most interested in is overclocking these things. Because, as it turns out, basically, if you just push more power into them, you can also get a lot more hash rate out of them. Now, one thing I want to make very clear right at the beginning of this section of the video is that if you're planning to overclock your KS0, you need to not only make sure you are cooling them properly with a 120mm fan like I am here, but even more importantly, you need to upgrade your power supply, as the stock one is simply just not capable of delivering enough power in order to overclock these things. And that can be very dangerous. I'll talk more about some great options for upgrading your power supplies, as well as adding a fan and other ways of further cooling your KS0s a bit later in the video, because these things can get really hot, especially after overclocking, and that is no good, so you definitely need to upgrade your cooling. But before we get ahead of ourselves, what is the deal with overclocking these IceRiver miners? Well, it basically just comes down to downloading a third-party, non-official firmware for your miner, which allows it to pull more power, set a higher clock speed, and therefore give you more hash rate. So, with the KS0 specifically, stock you get around 100 gigahash at 65 watts or so, but after overclocking you can get, well, it kind of depends actually, because we actually have a few different options when it comes to overclocking firmware. But depending on how lucky you were in the silicon lottery and how well you're able to keep your KS0 cool enough, again, more on that in just a bit, you can actually get up to 180 gigahash or even more from overclocking. And also, again, the power consumption will of course be higher, and the wattage of your miner after overclocking will depend based on what firmware you're using and how much you're overclocking it. But for something like 160 gigahash, you're probably looking at a bit over 130 watts of power. So one thing to note here is that by overclocking your KS0, you are absolutely reducing your mining efficiency, meaning the hash per watt is significantly worse after overclocking. But for some of you, that might still very much be worth it for the extra hash rate. It all depends on your power cost, really. Now, I want to note here as well that overclocking like this with third-party firmware is absolutely done at your own risk. It probably voids your warranty, might brick your miner, or just full-on break it. So, proceed with caution. But with that out of the way, let's look at the different options that we have available to us when it comes to overclocking firmware. And I'm going to start with the paid one, as I believe that is the one that is going to yield you the best results. And that is offered exclusively by 𝗬𝗬𝗏. 𝗬𝗬𝗏 is a well-known community member within the mining space, and if you've been active in the mining community for a while, you've probably heard his name before. So he's worked directly with a developer team to produce this firmware, and it gives your KS0 up to 180 gigahash at around 130 watts. To get the firmware file, you need to reach out to 𝗬𝗬𝗏 directly on either Discord or Telegram, and the price for the firmware is 100 Kaspa. If you're interested in getting it, I'll put a link to a video by Hobbyist Miner down in the video description. That video shows you the full process of installing the overclocking firmware, as well as how to get in contact with 𝗬𝗬𝗏. Now, in his video, he does do it on a KS0 Pro, but the process is exactly the same for the regular KS0. Of course, I can't vouch for anything here, and you're doing all of this at your own risk. Next up is the free one, and that is a fairly new firmware that came out just these past couple of weeks by another community member named 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏, aka PB Farmer. And it is free to download and install, but it does come with a 1% mining fee. So 1% of the time, your miner will be mining to this developer instead of to your wallet. Well, technically, that 1% is split 50-50 between the official Kaspa dev fund and 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏, who made this firmware. But the most interesting thing is that what sets this firmware apart is that instead of giving you pre-applied overclock settings, it lets you manually set your desired clock frequency and voltage, which basically means you can decide yourself how fast you want your miner's chip to work and how much extra power you want to feed it in order to be able to achieve that extra speed. I'll leave another link down in the video description to a video by 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, where he shows you how to install and overclock your KS0 with this firmware. And while you're down there, why don't you go give him a sub as well? And when you've done that, next we're gonna talk about power. Now, if you are going to overclock your KS0, getting a more powerful PSU is a must. But even if you're not going to OC your miner, you might still want to get something that is a little bit more reliable, as these laptop bricks that the KS0s come with aren't exactly known for their high quality. So you basically have two options here. The first one is if you just want a cheap way to push more power into your KS0 for overclocking, you can just get a more powerful laptop PSU. These don't cost very much and they'll get the job done, and you can kind of find them easily on Amazon. I'll link a couple of options down in the video description. I guess this video is gonna have a lot of links in the description. But there is a much nicer way to power your KS0s, and that is by using a server power supply, a breakout board, and these custom-made cables by community member 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is known for making super high-quality cables, and of course the fact that these cables hook up to a server PSU means that you can power multiple KS0s with just one power supply. Honestly, I don't have much more to say here. If you just want more power in an easy way for overclocking, you can get a more powerful laptop brick. But if you want some good quality stuff, get the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 cables with a server PSU and a breakout board. So you've probably noticed that my KS0 looks a little different because of the big RGB fan I've attached to it. Now, I splurged a bit here getting an expensive fan because I wanted this thing to look cool in my videos. But that said, getting any 120mm fan, even if just a very cheap one, is a very good idea, as these miners can get really hot. And if you're going to overclock your KS0, it is more or less required to have an additional fan like this in order for it to be able to dissipate all that extra heat generated by pushing more power into the miner to reach those higher hash rates. And also, theoretically speaking, the better cooling your KS0 has, the higher you should be able to overclock it, because it will be able to take more power before overheating. Now, you actually have quite a few options when it comes to fans for these. Obviously, the KS0 actually has a USB port on it, so you could just get any 120mm USB fan and plug that in. The problem there is that means you'll use extra power directly from the KS0 in order to drive the fan. So you might instead want to plug the fan into a regular USB wall charger, like any old phone charger you might have just lying around at home instead. That way the fan is pulling power from the wall instead of from the KS0. However, most 120mm fans don't have a USB plug. They just have either the regular 3 or 4 pin PC fan connector. So if you find a cool PC fan that you want to use on your KS0, you might want to get a USB to 4-pin fan adapter cable in order to power it. Some fans, however, not only need a 4-pin connector for power, but also another connector to control the RGB lights if you're going with something really fancy like I did here. And in that case, you might need to go with something super goofy like I've done here, which basically what I've done is I've plugged my fan into my PC with a few extension cables. Super over the top and unnecessary, but in my opinion, looks pretty cool. So the fan that I actually have here is the Lian Li SL Infinity 120 reverse blade. And that reverse blade part is really important, because it means that this fan is pulling air away from the miner instead of pushing air into the miner. Now, you absolutely don't need to buy a reverse blade fan for that. You can just, put your fan the other way around so that the back of the fan is facing out. But you want the fan to be moving air away from the miner, as that is the same direction as the small internal fans are moving the air. So you want the fans to be working, together, moving the air in all the same direction. And this is where we get to talking about mounting the fans on your miner. If you've got your KS0 lying down, then you can kind of just place the fan on top, and that should be good enough. But if you want some extra security that the fan will stay in place and won't fly away, or if you've got your miner standing on its side like I do, then you'll want to mount the fan with screws. And the screws you need are 30mm long UNC 6x32 thread screws. Basically, it's the same screws as most computer power supplies attached to the case with, but longer. Thankfully, this is a fairly common screw for attaching computer radiators, so you can get a pack of them for just a few bucks. And what I'll do is I'll link all of this fan stuff that I've been talking about down in the video description. But there is one more thing I want to talk about when it comes to cooling these miners, and that is the custom side grills offered by the meter box. They are basically custom made front and back plates with, for lack of a better word, air holes. They are very simple to swap out. It's just 2 Phillips head screws on each side to remove the original plates, and then you just use those same screws to attach the replacement ones. And the advantage is, obviously, better cooling. Hobbyist Miner did some testing with these, and he saw a 2 degrees Celsius reduction of the internal temperatures for the miner just from swapping to the grills. And the grills, combined with an external 120mm fan, saw a massive 8-degree reduction in internal temperatures. One thing to note though is that with these grills, it seems placing the external 120mm fan to blow air into the miner as opposed to away from the miner works better, as there now has become sort of a wind tunnel created within the miner itself. Of course, I'll leave a link to these grills down in the video description as well. And now, let's move on to how much Kaspa I've mined with my KS0, you know, the one I received from that same batch as all of you guys. Because I've let this one run constantly, completely stock with no overclocking on its own pool since I got it on the 14th of August. So, let's have a look at that, but first, quick word from our sponsor. HeroMiners.com is a long-time trusted mining pool with support for over 17 different CPU and GPU mineable coins, including Kaspa, Flux, Monero, Ironfish, Ergo, and Alephium, just to mention a few. And since the Ethereum merge, they've done everything they can to help you guys stay profitable, like doing multiple periods of 0% pool fees, regular giveaways and bonus events, greatly reduced parallel asset fees on Flux, 10 times faster Ergo payouts than other pools, and just in general having really low and competitive pool fees for all of their supported coins. On top of this, they also have servers in 13 different locations around the globe to make sure you have a strong connection no matter where in the world you're mining from. Of course, they also have everything else you'd expect from such a high quality pool, like nice stats and charts, ready-made bat files to help you connect your mining software to the pool, the option to choose between pool mining and solo mining, support for mining rig rentals and NiceHash, the list goes on and on. So check them out at HeroMiners.com or by clicking the link down in the video description. So as I mentioned, I've had this thing mining on its own address to Hero Miners since I got it, completely stock with no overclocking. And as you can see here, it's mined just over 6,100 Kaspa in, I believe, exactly 163 days, worth roughly $602 at today's coin price. Although coin prices overall have kind of gone down a lot recently, so this 6,100 Kaspa would be worth a bit over $900 at Kaspa's all-time high, which I believe was like a month and a half ago or something. Now this total paid amount that you can see here was from back in the day when I was GPU mining some Kaspa to this address, so that isn't relevant for this KS0. But we can see here the KS0 mines between 7.5 and 8 Kaspa per day currently, which is about 80 cents a day, again at today's coin price. Now my personal speculation is that before the next crypto market peak, which a lot of people expect to be in late 2025, this KS0 of mine is probably gonna mine maybe another 2,000 Kaspa, or a bit over maybe 3,000 if I overclock it. So let's just say my total yield from this thing will be 8,000 Kaspa. I'm just curious how much you guys think that will be worth in 2025. Let me know down in the comments below. And over here on the screen, I'll leave a link to my video to help you sort of calculate what Kaspa ASIC miners might be worth it to buy based on your own predictions. And down here, I'll put my video on some different ways to calculate what coin price Kaspa could potentially reach in an upcoming crypto bull market. So I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.